It's Rich Sheffrin, and I'm here with Todd Brown. And as you can see, there's a link below me. And that link is to a swipe file that Todd is currently selling, something that he's been accumulating for well over a decade. And so I thought we'd have a quick conversation about swipe files in general, how best to use them, why you would want them, and et cetera. So Todd, knowing so much more about not only your swipe files, but leveraging swipe files in general, why don't you start the conversation and kind of lead it where you think it should go?
Yeah, baby. First of all, let me show. I'm going to try to lift this real quick just to give a little tease. And so this thing right here, which is officially 22.4 pounds on the scale, has really become one of my most prized possessions in terms of a marketing asset. We're going to talk about what it is and why. So like you said, just to give a little backstory on this, and then we'll get into some valuable stuff related to swipe files in a second. Yeah, long ago, over a decade ago, so it's probably closer to 13 years, I started to get on as many mailing lists from top marketers, top direct response marketing companies, as many as I could. And some of that required me to buy products, newsletters from Agora, Motley Fool, subscribe to Newsmax, of course, buy things from some of the top online well-known marketers, Frank Kern, Russell Brunson, Jay Abraham, Dan Kennedy, all the best of the best, so that I could begin to get their direct mail. And what I did, to just really cut this short, was for the last 10 plus years, I saved every direct mail piece that I got from the best of the best marketers on the planet, the best direct mail pieces. And it was, which we'll talk about, and still is, an incredible resource, a go-to resource for me to keep my marketing ideas fresh, to make sure that being exposed to the best of the best copy, the best of the best ideas, the best of the best leads and arguments and offers and guarantees and all of that. And like I said, I told you before we started recording that then I dedicated a team member on my team for 6 weeks, full-time, over 120 hours, to take that entire 10-year plus collection, digitize it, and assemble it into what today I call the decade plus swipe file. And to just continue my little pitch for 1 second, it's truly one of a kind, man. There is nothing like this on the planet. What we're talking about is a decade of every mailing from the best marketers on the planet. And so what we decided to do was, for fun, really nothing more than really honestly for fun, is to pay a boatload of money to have 250 sets of this made. And now, as of earlier today, those 250 sets are up for grabs, first come, first serve. And then we're going to mail this out to all 250 people. And so that's the kind of the journey to how this bad boy came about. Now I want to talk, I'll say this, that there are 3 reasons why. Like, number one, let's take a step back. So early on, I saw that all of the legends of direct response, all the legends of direct response copywriting, the best of the best copywriters, all recommended a swipe file. They all talked about assembling copy, modeling, stimulating ideas, using a swipe file as the muse for new insights. And so I knew that I had to start to collect and use a swipe file. The reason why direct mail is because a couple things. Number one is that every single one of these pieces, besides being created, engineered by a top marketer or top copywriter, they pay big money to send this out, right? Direct mail is not cheap. It's not like sending out an email. It's not like popping something online. And so I know that because direct mail is expensive, I know that they almost always go the distance with every piece of the copy. So the ideas, the leads, the arguments, the offers, they're almost always with direct mail, especially from the best marketers. They're the best of the best. So right off the bat, man, this is wildly different than using an online campaigns as part of a swipe file. I'm not saying that there's no place for online campaigns as part of a swipe file, but the reality is that there's a lot of campaigns, the majority of campaigns online, despite them maybe looking nice, despite them maybe having curbside appeal, most of the campaigns online are flop. The reality is that most of the campaigns that we see online are not scalable. People aren't able to drive a lot of traffic and acquire a lot of buyers and do it profitably or do it within their KPI. And so I want to know always when I'm modeling something, when I'm swiping, which we're going to talk about what I mean by that, because we're not talking stealing, when I'm swiping, when I am analyzing the structure of a campaign, when I'm analyzing how the objections were overcome, when I'm analyzing how claims were made and the proof and all that. I want to know that I'm modeling and swiping from something that is proven and tested. And so I always say, if a marketer, if an entrepreneur online who's smart enough to recognize the value of a swipe file is swiping from or modeling from average ordinary campaigns, why should they expect then to get extraordinary results? If you model and swipe from ordinary average campaigns, you should expect to get average and ordinary results. And so I wanted to know always that I was modeling from proven, tested, confirmed winners, if you will. And because direct mail costs big money, right? Most of the time, the copy, they've gone the distance with the copy. They've gone the distance with the offer. The second thing that I realized that why I value direct mail so much and why I realized that the smartest marketers value direct mail so much is because there are a ton of campaigns in here that never appear online. They are back-end campaigns. Many times they're for buyers. They're for offers that they're exposing to certain segments of their list. And so by having a swipe file of direct mail pieces from great marketers that are dialed, I know that I'm often getting unique insights that competitors aren't getting, competitors that are only paying attention to the stuff online. The stuff online, everybody and their brother is modeling. Everybody and their brother is cut. That's why stuff gets knocked off so quickly, right? It goes from new and different to old and the same very quickly, stuff online. But yet, direct mail, it's wildly different. And so it doesn't get knocked off nearly as quick. It doesn't get knocked off nearly as easily. And so by looking at direct mail, I'm not only looking at the stuff, the most expensive campaigns that people dialed in, but I'm also looking at stuff that competitors aren't looking at, right? And so that they aren't seeing. The third thing that I'll say is the beauty of using and collecting. And this was really the main thing, Rich, that why I chose to collect all these pieces and to refer to these pieces and use these pieces over such a long period of time is because I got to see and get to see the trends, the things, the copy chunks, the copy nuggets, the verbiage, the angles, the hooks that were used in the most expensive campaigns by the best marketers, which cost the biggest money over and over. And so when I saw copy chunks being used over and over, a certain angle, a certain hook, a certain way of introducing the offer, a certain way of constructing and delivering the offer, I knew and know that that's a winning structure to model. And does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. It makes complete sense. And it reminds me of a lot of things that I want to make sure I wrote them down as we were talking that I want to make sure that we cover, but keep going.
Yeah.
While you're talking, I just want to see if I have something so I can hear you. Yeah. I'm just going into that closet because I might have something from I can find it like that is shit. It has to be over 20 years ago of mine. So keep talking.
Yeah. And so the other thing I'm just going to throw out. So, a lot of people, and this is really important to me that everybody understand this, especially everybody that all the 250 people that claim this bad boy right here, is that when we use the word swipe, and I think the word swipe is often wildly misunderstood. What we're not talking about is we're not talking about stealing. We're not talking about taking massive chunks of copy and just copying and pasting it into your own sales letter, your own webinar, your own VSL. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about modeling. We're talking about getting insights from the best of the best copy, the best of the best hooks and headlines and ideas and offers to better understand the proper structure for your own campaigns. So we're not talking about stealing. I actually really, in hindsight, what I would rather have named this bad boy rather than swipe file, because the word swipe has these negative connotations by people that misuse it and misunderstand it, is I would almost rather call it a muse file, right? A muse is a source of inspiration for ideas, right? And so this is really a muse file. The thing is that it's a muse file of proven, tested campaigns from the best marketers used over and over again. The other thing, Rich, that I'll say just as a quick aside is that the cool thing in here too, right, is that because this was collected over 10 plus years, right, there is every imaginable format of marketing material in here. So there are letters, there are postcards, there are catalogs, there are magalogs, there are lift notes, and there's offers in here for everything that you can imagine, from products to conferences, to webinars, to lead magnets, to high ticket, low ticket, mid-tier, everything under the sun. And it's a beautiful thing. The other thing too about direct mail for everybody to understand is that, like I said earlier, there are things that get mailed out that the overwhelming majority of marketers and copywriters will never see, that are offers the best marketers make to certain segments of their list. And so back end offers, higher ticket offers that go out as direct mail that nobody online. I wanted to see that. I wanted to know what they were mailing out. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Lastly, before you show what it is that you're going to show, what really magnified the need to get this in the hands of my best clients, which is why I originally made this, turn this into this massive thing, was after my time with Agora, specifically Joe Schriefer at Agora Financial. And so for those that don't know, the Agora companies, which Rich, I know you've been a big part of for a very long time, you actually were my introduction to the world of Agora. So Agora is the 800-pound gorilla in the world of direct response, 1.5 billion or so at their peak in direct response sales. And when I spent time with Joe Schriefer, they were on the top of the mountain within the Agora company's world. They're known, Joe was known as the copy chief at Agora Financial, and he was really known for being able to take people off the street and turn them into winning copywriters, oftentimes in a matter of weeks. I got the chance to interview a whole bunch of them. And what Joe shared with me, which was really interesting, was that a core part of their training for their new copywriters, a big part of what allowed them to turn these new folks into winning copywriters, was how they used and equipped them with a swipe file. And what Joe talked about was that the smart marketers, the smart copywriters, the ones that continue to develop chops and skills to produce sales producing copy, are the ones that look at winning swipes, do it daily, and they look at the hidden structure behind the message. They look at the psychology. They look at the emotional triggers. They look at the persuasion devices being used. They look at the copy and they ask, why is this being used here? And why is this being used here? And why is this being used here? When you've got winning copy and you look at that winning copy, like the decade plus swipe file, through that lens, you're able to learn and master the proper flow, the proper timing, and the proper communication of dialed copy.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, Agora got as high as 1.8 billion. So that was at the height. You introduced me to Joe Schriefer, and then Joe Schriefer became a boss of mine for a while. And yeah, and one of the things that always blew me away, like that I never really realized until I was inside of Agora, not just consulting from the outside, and learned it from Joe, was that a copywriter might spend, let's say, 2 months on a like front end promo, like a 75-page VSL, right? But of the 8 weeks that comprise that 2 months, 6 weeks was on the idea, and then 2 weeks was writing the rest of the sales letter. And the reason that they could bang out sales letters that fast once they had the idea was that what you were talking about, and I don't know if he said it this way or if I just like thought of it this way, really like constructing a blueprint of the sales letters, like every paragraph, what was its, not just what's its intention, but what would you categorize like each paragraph, because once you have the structure of you will notice the same structure over and over again, and you can just write to that structure because that structure is a winning structure. And I definitely learned that. I learned that from Joe. It was just basically credibility, offer, just different element, guarantee, like they're just, and every paragraph. And actually, I don't know if you know this, but just talking about that reminds me when John Reese had Traffic Secrets, right? And I think Michael Fortin wrote the copy
Yeah.
and it was crappy. And John and I were close friends at that time. John was mentoring me, so I don't even want to say that like we were not equals at that time. John was much higher up the mountain than I was, but we were friends. And he sent me the copy. He's, dude, this sucks. And I can't even understand why it sucks. And I started reading it and I'm like, totally agree. And I don't know why either. Let me make some calls. So I called Carl Galletti, right? Because at that time,
Yeah.
Carl was one of the top copywriters. And I said, Carl, we got this sales letter. It's not good. And I can't even understand why it's not good. And he said, send it over to me. And so I sent it over to him and he read it and he called me back. He's like, I know why it's bad. And I'm like, why is it bad? The structure is all over the place. He's got paragraph 1 here. It's like paragraph 10 is the credibility. Paragraph 3 is it just like the whole structure makes no sense. And I was like, can you send me over like what you've done so far with it? Like he didn't change it, just blueprinting it. And I actually then called John back and I was like, I just spoke to Carl Galletti and he like broke down why it's not working. Like it wasn't that it wasn't converted because it hadn't come out yet, but when you read it, it just was disjointed. And John and I both were not veteran enough copywriters to even understand what was going on that was making it just not resonate. But like totally back to Joe's point that like winning copy just has that structure. And that's why, when they train copywriters, it's like they give them swipes and then they break down that structure. And once they've broken it down enough, those structures become like a way of thinking. And I think you've gotten there, like in your thinking. I've never taken the time to discipline to do that on a daily basis. I remember 2 other things like with swipe, and then I just want to get back to this one thing that I just found. First time that this is actually the first time that I ever used swipe, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the second time I ever used swipe was when I had my assistant. So this was still prior to even me getting fully like line. I found John Carlton's 2 sites that he wrote for, OHP Direct and I think TRS Direct. And I had my assistant copy every single page of the website and turn them into binders for me. And I used to try and write a business sales letter, modeling a fighting sales letter and changing the least amount of copy possible. So selling my product instead of a fighting product. And I found that really helped me become a better writer because it made me much more engaged in the copy. I also remember in the AWAI training course, right? They told you to write out by hand, like a sales letter a day, and sort of Gary Halpert and stuff like that. I tried that for 1 day. Like my hand hurt by the end of the day, and my AD, I didn't even get anything out of it because I wasn't really engaged. I was just copying it. And I was like, that really didn't work for me. And so what I did was I would take sales letters that spoke to me, that like ones that got me to want to buy. And a lot of the times they were like Dan Kennedy ones that you have in those swipe files, because I'm lucky enough to have a copy of them. And I would just read them on my iPhone and then play it at high speed. And I found that if I listened to like Dan Kennedy's sales letters, the ones that I really liked, over and over again, I could start writing in that, like in his tone, in his voice, without even trying. And actually, when I look at like the report of mine that I got the most testimonials on, like a Founders Club report, the Hidden Obstacles report, I see so much Dan Kennedy in there because I was listening to a lot of Dan Kennedy during that time. And I can totally, like, when it's not my way of speaking, it's Dan's, but I was listening to it over. And the very first time I ever did use swipe, and I can't believe I have this. So this is, say, index card box, right? It says copywriting on it. This is for the very first sales letter I ever wrote. And it was selling my hypnosis, like everything I learned in the hypnosis business. And I wasn't very sophisticated back then. The sales letter was selling a $10,000 program. David Gonzalez and Talman Knutson were 2 of the people that bought, right? And I went and bought every opportunity magazine, right? Logic being that this is pre-internet for the most part, right? And, but people were spending money on those ads, right? And I was looking for phrases that I could just start to pepper in, right? So I'm as serious as a heart attack, and I will back it up with my checkbook. Right? That's the line, right? I promise to reveal in step-by-step detail every cutting-edge strategy and technique I've perfected. Nothing will be held back. Get set to write 2 things. The first, an ebook. So this was like, I must have found this one like online. The second is a check for anything you want. A Ferrari, a round-trip ticket around the world. Prepare yourself for some startling information. What you're about to read turns cherished notions upside down. And then the last one, but I have hundreds of these, and I incorporated these all into this letter. And this letter it's sent out to 35 places that I could potentially sell it to, and 27 of them bought. Like, it was an insane number. I know this sounds a bit mind-boggling, and quite frankly, when I first sat down to write this letter, I realized I had a serious problem. My problem: how do I describe these powerful new strategies and techniques without making it sound like a bunch of hype, or so seemingly extravagant that you might be tempted not to believe me? And it's just like, a lot of these are like trite, and they're still in letters today, but I can't believe I still have them. This
So
is literally
funny.
over 20 years ago. I made these index cards. I got to put them into Evernote at some point.
No, man,
But
you said so much. I think I love it. Look,
But-
go ahead. I'm sorry.
we've known each other a really long time, and I
Yeah.
would say, like, there's no doubt that, like, the Todd Brown I knew 15 years ago versus the Todd Brown I know today, like, there are many differences, but certainly one of them is you are, if you are not the best, you're one of the best at being able to convert cold traffic into customers. And alongside that are some seriously honed copywriting chops. And can you talk about, like, how you've used those swipe files in general, whatever, on your path to getting as good as you've become?
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
There was a time when I
appreciate
was
that.
better than you, and now you left me in the dust.
I think that may
But
be
you've
just
honed
that.
it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it may be a little bit more of you've just focused on.
Doesn't matter why, but like, you
okay.
did certain things that got you to where you are. And so that's
Fair
what I
enough.
get.
I'll take it. I'll take
Yeah.
it. I think really, if I'm really being honest, there are really only two ways that I've really benefited from, that I've used the swipe file and benefited from it. The first is simple, and anybody can do it. And I think you mentioned it earlier, and that is reading good copy. I really believe that better, even more valuable than reading books about copy and watching videos about copy, is actually reading good copy. Right.
And do you think
Reading it.
just even doing that passively makes a profound difference, even
I
without the
do.
blueprinting?
Yes, I do. I
Okay.
really do, because I've never written copy out by hand. I also think that I started one day, and after the headline, I was also like, I'm out. No way am I doing this. But I think you become accustomed to, when you're reading good copy, and that's the important thing, right? That,
Yeah.
look, man, I hate to say this, because there are a lot of my clients a lot of my new students would fall into this group. Most of the stuff that seems to new people like good copy isn't good copy. It's hyperbolic, it's exaggerated, it's filled with puffery. Good, yeah, exactly. The tsunami-like steroid, amazing bicep building lead generation strategy. Good copy doesn't feel like copy. It doesn't read like copy. You're not aware of, you don't have that because you're not aware that you're being moved to a certain destination. It slips under the radar. And so it's really important that what you're studying is good copy, and you know it is. And so I really believe, Rich, that passively, even without knowing why they're saying certain things and doing certain things, and even initially without even being aware of the order, you really start to pick up and become in tune with the flow and feel, right? The flow and the feel, the way they explain things, the words that they use, sentence length, paragraph length, the magnitude of the claims that they make and don't make. You start to become aware of the flow and feel. After a little while of just passively reading, doing it daily, let's say, or at least a couple times a week, good copy. When you then go over to subpar copy or typical copy, you immediately feel a difference. You immediately see a difference. You can immediately recognize it. And so the more you read good copy, the more you can recognize good copy. And when you write, you can immediately, or when you're crafting your own copy, you immediately tend to recognize, at least I did and do, I can immediately recognize when I'm crossing over from good copy to hyperbolic puffery, to vague generalities. And so really, I would say, and there's so much that we can talk about as it relates to just the benefit of passive reading, like even tone. So like paying attention to being able to pick up on, depending on the lead type, like depending on what the lead type, depending on whether somebody's going negative or somebody's going positive, where somebody's focusing on greed or somebody's focusing on fear, like you start to pick up on the tone of the voice. And so I believe that reading good copy and doing it daily, even passively, helps you to refine and hone your own voice based on the theme that you're going with. Imagine, right? So when you were talking about, let's say, the fighting stuff that John Carlton used to work on, and now imagine that you're creating copy for like a relationship repair product. Likely the voice and tone that you're going to use isn't going to be the same. So voice and tone of one promotion, of one theme, of one angle isn't necessarily going to be the same as, right, another angle. And so it helps you to become aware of the appropriate tone, the appropriate pace. And my gosh, there's just so much more, man, that we could get into. And so that's the first way. The second way is simple. For me, it was a matter of when I was getting ready to, and still when I get ready to craft a particular campaign, if it's lead gen or if it's a high ticket offer, I go and I look at the high ticket offers or the lead gen offers, and I'll go through and I'll look at, when do they introduce the offer? So let's take high ticket. When do they introduce the offer? Do they introduce the offer early? Do they introduce the offer late? When do they introduce the bonuses, right? Do they do it after? When do they introduce the price? Are they building value first? Because the flow and timing of, let's say, a high ticket offer is different than a low ticket offer, and when the price gets introduced. And so I'll look at those campaigns. I'll look for the flow. I'll look for the timing. And then, of course, I look for what you have on some of those index cards. I'll look for, is there a go-to statement or sentence or phrase that they use over and over to justify the price? Is there a phrase, is there a statement that they use, or languaging, phraseology that they use over and over to give the discount? And so I look at those, right? So now I'm aware of flow, I'm aware of timing, I'm aware of ordering, and I've got some nuggets from the best of the best. And then I sit down and write.
I got it. So I want to quickly, because I forgot about this, but you'll remember this because this goes back a long time ago. Two different things to show you really quick, because we created a bonus for this. And then, like, we can say goodbye. I know you got a busy day today. We created a bonus for this. And I was thinking, what do I have that is like in line with what you've put together? And what you've put together is so impressive, massive, and useful. What is it that I have that could be, that people couldn't get and find anywhere? And so what I put together was a single swipe file that was the webinar that I did back when we first created automated webinars together. And I remember, like, when I played that webinar for you, you were like, this is fantastic. You get to the end and it's, I either should not do this at all or I need to buy this course. And so it's two pieces. The first is the actual webinar script. And what's interesting is that this was like during a time when I forgot how important the offer was. And so the offer was crappy. And so I had to do a ridiculous amount of persuasion to get people who were not interested in learning business to desperately want to learn business by the time the webinar was over. And the script is the entire script. It's 212 pages, right? So it's every single word I said. And a lot of these are like something I'm working on a webinar right now, and I still use this because there are so many good bits of content that can be redone, right? But then we also did that $10,000 workshop for founders members where they paid to really understand the entire structure, because this was early on and nobody was really talking about it. So I'm looking to make sure that, I think that's this. Webinars and everything else. This is before webinar courses were out and stuff. Yeah. And so, like, I break down what I was doing in every persuasion element. So this is 56 pages. So like slides 3 through 6, right? Like here were credibility and celebrity. And so the goal is to establish maximum credibility and celebrity, right? The combination's powerful. Your goal is to answer these questions: why your attendees should listen to you, why everything they're about to hear is true, why they're lucky to have a chance to listen to you, why you're able to deliver on the promise of the event, why they're in the right place at the right time to get their questions answered. To establish credibility, think through what you've personally accomplished, what obstacles. So it just goes through like page after page of slide 7. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to grab attendees' attention, right? And all the ways that we're trying to do that. Shocking statement. Share a powerful example. Surfacing current problems and frustrations, list 1, right? And I go through like how to go about that. The pacing, right? Hurt and rescue, right? So every slide is being broken down. Slide 8, the big promise. Like, what do you want to promise? Slide 9, you're reaffirming the promise. Slide 10, you're introducing the core concept of the theme of the webinar. And I'm like, when you're looking at the slides with like exactly what I said, you can go back and forth, and it's really a breakdown of everything. That's why people paid 10 grand for this. That's the only people that were ever able to see this, because I don't think I've ever spent so much time planning exactly what I did. And this webinar made 8 figures, like easy, because it was the primary way that we sold our coaching program for years, right?
Yeah.
And I know webinars are still something that a lot of people do. And if you ever had a challenge with like how to create a webinar, like this has everything inside it. And so we're just throwing that in as a bonus, and it's digital. So you can even copy and paste clever things that I've said. And I remember, last thing I'll say, and then you can tie it down and we can say goodbye. At the end of the CSIB live stream, like all the people that knew me were blown away by how I ended it, right? Like about like everyone knows that change can happen in an instant, but it never happens for no reason. I'm asking you to let me be the catalyst, to be that change for you. I'm reaching out my hand, right? And all you have to do is grab it right now to allow me to make that difference in your life, to be the change like that will happen. Because like you've all heard it, like insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Like in 30 days from now, are you going to be in a different place than you are right now, doing the same things that you've been doing up until this point? Because odds are is that you won't be. You'll be in the same exact point, right? But I'm reaching out my hand, right? Like I just kept going, and that all came from that webinar from like a decade ago, right?
I got
like,
the chills. Listen, I just
right?
want to get up and work out. That's how I feel right now. Like, my
That's
God.
the power of swipe. Like when you find something that resonates with you, you remember it, and it just comes out in like at random times, like when necessary, when you're writing, when you're creating, when you're trying to sell, because those kinds of like statements are generally not easy for me, right? That's not my skill set, but having that reservoir of stuff and reviewing it can make a world of difference. So I appreciate you. I think it's awesome that you were willing to put together something that took you over a decade to put together and be willing to share it, even to sell it, because like, really, like, what's the value of spending 10 years buying all these products to get on all these lists, cataloging it all, right? Spending hundreds of dollars just to print the thing, right? And God knows how much to ship 20 plus pounds of it. So yeah, props to you for even making this available, and take us home.
Man, I so appreciate it. Let me say this, right? I think it was my time working with you and really seeing your ability to put together messages, like almost looking at the time, right? Looking at offers, it was a secondary thought for you, but yet you were still able to put together these messages, man, that move people to want to buy, right? Even back then when the offer was a secondary thought for you, you were just able and move people in droves to the tune of multiple millions of dollars. That really made me fall in love with good copy, good messages, and really drove me to want to learn and master the flow, the timing, the chunks, the order, all of that. And so it's not a stretch at all, man, to say that I don't believe this would exist for me, for my team, for my clients, or for anybody who grabs one of the 250 copies if it wasn't really for your influence. And I say that, and I mean that wholeheartedly. And so look, we'll end with this. I know you're traveling. I have a crazy day ahead of me. But look, if you consider yourself a serious student of direct response, a serious student of copy, this should be a no-brainer for you. This is over 4,000 pages of marketing gold, of stuff the majority of your competitors will never see. This is a way for you to continue to keep your marketing ideas fresh, innovative. This is a way for you to get exposure to the best marketers, what they've mailed, the best of the best over the last 10 plus years, that you can swipe from, that you can model, that you can study, that you can use in your own campaigns offline or online. We have 250 sets of this. We do not have any plans on creating any more. at any time in the future. Once the 250 are gone, they are gone. If you want one, go to strategicprofits.com/swipe, and I would be thrilled to send you this. You're going to absolutely love this thing. And Rich, as always, man, I love chatting with you, dude. I love getting to spend time with you. Travel safe, man, and I can't wait to get some updates from you, man. When you
Yeah,
get
I'll
back.
call you as soon as I get back, tell you some stories. And thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. I know that this was a valuable conversation for me, and thanks for doing this, and speak to you in a week, man.
You got it.